Okay, filters, right? Super outdated. Why are we still talking about these? I don't know. But the registry still tests you on filters, so we're going to talk about it. I have two different types of filters here that I could demonstrate to my class. One is this type. It's actually like kind of known as a scoliosis filter. We used to use these when you used to take an entire body in one picture. And this is a boomerang filter. A boomerang filter is meant, again, for large subject contrast difference parts. A lot of times we used it like under shoulders or standing feet, things like that. But really, we're not really using these anymore. So most of the time our software is fixing these images for us. We don't need to use them. But the main thing that you need to know for the registry is what do filters do? First off, filters, think about what material they're made out of, right? Are they made out of lead? If they were made out of lead, like a lead shield, right? They would stop all radiation. They would attenuate all the radiation. They're not made out of lead. They're usually made out of an aluminum equivalency, maybe copper, maybe plastic, whatever they're made out of. What they're doing is they are hardening the beam as it's leaving the x-ray tube or after it's leaving the patient. So the difference between these two, to use this Scoli filter, right, what you would do is you would actually tape it to the, or it would have magnets on your collimator and you would just put it on there. Again, you would put the thinnest part over, or the thickest part over the thinnest part of the body, because you would have a huge subject difference, right? So if I'm doing a full scoliosis picture, and I know my phantom is only a thoracic here, but if I did a full scoliosis from the base of the skull down through the pubic symphysis, right, meaning all of the spine, this area of my neck needs very little radiation to get, right? But my pelvis is going to be the largest part of my body. I'm going to need to use way more technique. So let's say I'm just going to make up numbers. Let's say for the pelvis I need to use, say, 20 mass, but up here I only need to use 5 mass. If I use 20 mass for this entire body part, this is going to get super fried out and it's going to be very black, right? This is going to be a good amount of radiation for my pelvis area, but this is going to be way too much radiation for my neck. So what you do is you put one of these guys way up here at the x-ray tube, and then when it's taking the x-ray, now I can use 20 mass and it hardens the beam and it makes it seem like it's a thicker body part than it really is. So now I can use that 20 mass and now the whole entire area is going to all be at a good amount of exposure. The other type of filter is a boomerang, right? Boomerangs, again, these aren't really used, but a lot of times you would use a boomerang for, like, again, a big subject contrast difference part. These are big subject contrast difference parts. The shoulder, for example, is a big subject contrast part. If you touch and feel, you can actually palpate for your AC joint, right? Your acromion-clavicular joint. It's this little tiny knobby thing right here. If, for example, I was a huge bodybuilder or football player, right? My pectorals are going to be way out here. If I say, let's say I needed 10 mass to shoot through that, okay, I'm just making up numbers. The AC joint, this little tiny guy, does not need 10 mass to shoot through. So if I use 10 mass to shoot through this, maybe my scapula and everything in this area is going to be well exposed, but this is going to get fried out. So what do? You slide this underneath here, and now if I use 10 mass, the whole area can receive 10 mass, and it's not going to get burned out. So what do filters do to IR exposure and contrast? This is the most important part. Filters reduce IR exposure, and they decrease contrast. Remember what your definition of contrast is, the difference between adjacent IR exposures, right? The difference between here and here, this is going to be very black, this is going to be very white. If I added a filter right here, it's all going to be very gray, right? So it's reducing the contrast, it's creating a longer scale, more grays, more information. If I had my shoulder, right, this would be very black and white, this would be fried out black, this would be very white. When I add the boomerang underneath, now it's a very gray image, right? So it's going to decrease our IR exposure, but it's also going to decrease our contrast.
So let's talk about these filter numbers, right? So I have a shoulder x-ray here, and I know we're missing our humerus, that's just the way our shoulder is. But notice that our technique was 69 at 13 mass. It ended up giving us a DAP, dose area product, of 942. Remember, the two things that make up dose area product are the dose and the area, aka the dose and the area, collimation. The EI was 504. Remember that our TI is 500. So we are basically at a 0. We are aiming for 500. We gave the machine a 500. I want you to notice how this x-ray looks. Now, when we added the boomerang filter, do you see how it actually added more grays to the image? I'm going to move this just so we can see this a little bit better. So again, it's the same technique, 69 and 13. Notice that the dose is still 942, but the EI went down 424 and the DI is now negative 0.71. So why didn't the DAP change? It literally is the exact same DAP, right? Even though we can tell that there's obviously something different going on in this picture. Remember, dose is dose area product. I'm sorry, DAP is dose area product. Area is the exact same. I just changed this with our field of view. That didn't actually change how it processed the information. It's still the same. But the collimation is still the same and the technique is still the same. Therefore, our dose is still exactly 942, right? See the difference? This one does not have the boomerang, same dose. Now, when I add the boomerang, do you see how suddenly I have more grays, right? This little beaded thing is in here so that the radiologist knows that there is something aftermarket basically on the patient, not part of their body, right? But also notice that how it adds more grays, more information, and therefore it's going to be a more negative number. As we add lower numbers, right, as we get rid of all of the black values, it's going to become an underexposed image, right? On this picture, the original picture, we shot more black values, and therefore it was a good image. Let's look at the histogram as we talk about this. So right now, this is my histogram for my shoulder, and I have some white values, and I have some gray values, and some black values. Remember, the way the histogram is set up is the 0 is going to be normally the white values. There's some places that are different, but we won't get into that. And this 16,383, this is one of your definitions, right? This is your K-bit. This is how many grays are available to your system. So we have 16,000 available to the system. Doesn't mean that we're seeing 16,000 in this picture, right? What we're actually seeing is it counted all of these values, and let's say I had 20 of this white value, 20 of this light gray value, 700 of this light gray value, right? Maybe it's like this gray or something like this gray probably. And then a whole bunch of different gray values, and then a peak of black values, and then some more black values over here. So as we go down to this end, we're going to have a darker picture, and as we're on this end, we're going to have a lighter picture. So here's my new boomerang picture. Pay attention to the histogram, and I'm going to change it now to the more gray image. Do you see how suddenly now we have a whole bunch more grays in the histogram, right? So now we have more grays in the picture, but also we have a higher spike over on that white end. We don't have as much black as we did on the previous picture. I'll show it to you again. This was the black and white image, no boomerang, right? Very black and white, high contrast. As we have a filter, we're going to have more grays, and now it's going to be a longer scale. If I close out of my histogram, which is kind of a tedious process here, do you see how now we're at a lower number, right? A lower EI and DI, but the technique was the exact same. By adding a filter, what you're doing is we're actually reducing how much radiation makes it to the image receptor. The entrance skin dose is going to be the same because this is going underneath the patient. DAP is the same because we're still exposing the patient to the same amount of radiation in the air. What's different is how much radiation makes it to the image receptor. So in this case, as I have added a filter, I have decreased IR exposure, right? Going back to the original picture, this was a 0 picture, right? More black and white, higher contrast. When I add the boomerang, it's going to be a lower EI because I'm actually attenuating more radiation. This black has been attenuated by this gray boomerang, giving us longer scale contrast and decreased IR exposure.